So I have a big panel today who's going to talk to you about Joyzen. What is Joyzen? What are the principles of Joyzen that help you as a parent and help you to move your children forward? So I'm going to start off to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their families. Who's in your family? How old are your kids? So I'm going to start off with our Joyzen guru, Liz Fuchs.
Hello, everyone. I'm Liz Fuchs. My son is 28 years old, and he was born prematurely, and so he has intellectual and developmental disabilities due to that. And Joyzen, as far as how it got created, was that when Tyler was going into the post-secondary experience at the University of Missouri, Central Missouri, what I was noticing was that the parents were having a terrible time letting go, so to speak. And of course, it makes sense. Why would you not be able to let go? I mean, my God, we've got these kids and we're in there and we're advocating for them and we're getting therapy and we're doing all these things. And then they become 18 years old and they go into a post-secondary experience. How do we let go of all those feelings and thoughts and emotions surrounding that development? So what happened is that because of his experience at the University of Missouri, Central Missouri, watching that go on, and then Tyler transitioned over into the University of Missouri, St. Louis, into the Succeed program. And I was witnessing a lot of the same problems where parents were coming in and they were like cleaning their room and getting involved every day with what was happening. And it wasn't allowing the young adults to develop into that independent person that we want them to become. And so fortunately, I approached Grace Francis, who's now out at George Mason University, and at the time was the director of Succeed. And I said, we really need to create a parenting program to help parents not only let go and let out the net, so to speak, but also give them the actual skills that they need, not only emotionally, but behaviorally, so that they can do the natural transition of letting go and letting their young adults experience successes and failures. And so I've also had the opportunity to work along with, and you will meet Andrew Kleithermes, and wonderful, wonderful gentleman who has helped us with the Succeed program over the last 6 years. So that is my quick story.
And you've got two other kids that get Joyzen too, right, Liz?
Yeah, well, I have, we live Joyzen. I have two older children. I have an older son who's 31 and he's in engineering, and I have a daughter who's now turning 30 and she is a pediatric oncology nurse. So yes, they've all been entrenched into the idea of independent living and supporting Tyler, who's my youngest, in his quest into independent living.
Excellent. All right, well, let's turn to Andrew. You mentioned Andrew is your partner in crime in Joyzen.
Yes.
Andrew, tell us about your family and your background.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andrew Kleithermes, and I work for the University of Missouri, St. Louis for the Succeed program. I am a proud father of one newly 9-year-old in January, Mr. Independence. No one told me 9 was going to feel like this. So I am been a part of the Succeed program for 6 years, over 6 years, and have taken this beautiful ride with Liz and presenting Joyzen in the parent workshop. And every time I do it, I learn something new, and it helps me out in a new way as a parent first, and also as a professional.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you're here with us. Scott, I think you are the grandfather of our St. Louis ARC Joyzen movement. If you could tell us a little bit about your family and how you came to be part of the Joyzen crew.
So my wife Donna and her daughter Katie. Katie, who is 24, turning 25 in a month or so. She is highly functioning autistic with some learning disabilities, but I've always had a lot of confidence in her abilities, and she can do whatever she wants to do. within her capability, but she's just got to work at it.
We're going to circle back and ask to hear about some of your experiences. I'm really happy you're here because when you started this process, you and Donna were a couple, but you weren't married yet. So you've been really kind of exploring your role as a parent and how that's grown and changed. And I think that that'll be a really fun part of our conversation. So welcome, Scott. Rachel, how about you?
I have 3 girls. I have Lily, who is 22. I have Ellie, who's 17, and I have Molly, who is, no, sorry, Ellie's 20, Molly's 17. And my younger 2, the 17 and 20-year-old, have Fragile X syndrome, which, if you don't know, is sort of a cousin to autism, I would say, except that we can genetically nail exactly what's going on, where autism is like this nebulous, we have no idea. Anyway, Ellie is in the UMSL Succeed program. She's a second year, and she is, you know, her independence, thanks to Joyzen and everything that I've learned, has flourished. And, you know, she's doing things that I never thought she could do. And then, you know, Molly, who is a little more involved than Ellie, we're sort of looking post-secondary next steps and not really sure where that's going to take us, but that's where we are. So.
Well, I'm really pleased to meet you and I'm really glad you joined us today. Thank you, Rachel. And Brandy, last but not least, I want to introduce you or have you introduce yourself. You've got a brand new Succeed student coming online.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Brandy Martine, and I have 3 children, and Jake is 20, and he's the one that will be going to Succeed in August. He has 2 younger sisters. So I actually have 2 going away to college next year. So it's going to be a Joyzen week when both of them are gone for a while. But Avery is 17 and she's accepted into Mizzou. And then our youngest, Sydney, is 14. And I think we really was inspired or interested in Joyzen when we were in the transition stage with Jake leaving high school. We've always said that, you know, we're raising young adults, not young children. But entering into this new world of adulthood was very scary, and I didn't know quite how to continue to push him along while I learned everything that we needed to navigate this new transition in life. So Joyzen has been great. And Andrew has been very helpful with all the questions I constantly reach out to him with. So that's been great. And yeah, we're really excited and ready just to kind of keep moving forward.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to ask you guys some personal stories, but I want to give everybody that's listening a little bit of a foundation of what is Joyzen. And Liz, I'm going to turn to you for that. You've got a background working with a variety of folks around emotional intelligence and positive behavior supports. Tell me what some of the critical components and principles of Joyzen are. What makes up a Joyzen experience?
I've had the opportunity to work alongside for, over 20 years with Dr. Tim Jordan, who is a developmental behavioral pediatrician, well known in our area. And he did lots of camps. And in those camps, we worked with lots of children in terms of dealing with what we frame as emotional intelligence. It's going beyond that. It's not just about understanding the experiences you've gone through and the emotions that are tied to it, but how they've shaped and formed your thought process, how you react in the world. And so, and I'm also an instructor for a parenting course called Redirecting Children's Behavior. So, and I also worked for several years in the mental health field. So there's kind of this overlayment as far as my background. And as I said, when I came into the post-secondary environment and I was watching parents struggle, and I too, because really the post-secondary world was just starting to unfold as far as colleges bringing on these programs. So they were really struggling in a lot of ways as to how were they going to best serve these students who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and how do they fill into those holes as far as that integration together. But the big piece to me was, I said, was that the parents were really struggling with letting go. And if you're not able to let go and allow your young adult to experience not only the successes of their journey, but also the failures of their journey, then you're not allowing them to grow. And so many of these children were, not children, young adults were coming in, and they were still more emotionally 14, 15, 16, and they didn't have the skills they needed to navigate successfully that secondary or college environment because they hadn't been developing all along. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the parents were stepping in along the way, rightfully so. There's nothing wrong in that process. The big piece is how, as you as a parent, how are you going to allow your child to get, and let's say with like Andrew, that they go and they have a job, that they go from the college campus to off campus and they have to take a bus. And you've never allowed them that opportunity before because you were driving them the whole time and you were making sure that they got to where they were going, and you made sure that they got home, and then you scheduled their appointments and you scheduled, you know, the activities that are going on with them. How do you go from being that parent to the parent who steps back and has to trust that your child is going to get on the bus, nothing's going to happen to them, and get to the job place? So when we created Joyzen, what is Joyzen? Joyzen is an intense 8-hour workshop designed to provide the parents with the emotional and behavioral skills they need to successfully let out the net of protection and allow their child to reach their 100%. And I want to emphasize that, their 100%. Tyler's 100%, my son's 100% is not going to be the same as Rachel's daughter's 100%. It's not going to be the same as Scott's daughter's 100%. But what we want to do is we want to get out of their way. We want to get out of their way in a way where we're managing our fears and allowing them to get on the bus and go. And if they don't make it to the job, that they are allowed to experience that and to help learn how to begin to problem solve what went wrong so that they can navigate. Because if something happens to us as a parent, and unfortunately, I mean, we're looking at an environment where we have COVID and a lot of people are, you know, some people aren't making it. Think about that. We're all going to die. And I'm going to state this in a way that, I mean, it's something we don't talk about, but the truth of the matter is we're all going to die. And what will happen to your young adult if they haven't been allowed to succeed and fail in just normal day-to-day activities and normal day-to-day living? And you're out of the picture because no one is going to take care of your young adult as well as you are. So Joyzen, we got in there, and what we do is we really work with parents, and it's not just about talking about things that are happening, but it's, as I said, it's dealing with the emotions, your fears, and us giving you the skills that you need so that your young adult will be independent. My son, Tyler, lives independently in a small house. He cooks, he does his laundry, he does drive. He was holding down a job for 2 years and he lost the job, and we were in the process of getting another job, and then COVID happened and a lot of other little things. So those, you want to be able to get to that point. And as I said, your child's 100%. Not every young adult is going to maybe reach that pinnacle, but we want to at least give them the opportunity to possibly grow into that. And a lot of people with children and young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities struggle with that piece of letting go. So in a nutshell, Joyzen is about helping parents emotionally and behaviorally to deal with the process of letting go.
That is a great big topic. So 8 hours is definitely not too long to sit and talk about that. I guess what I'd like to do is hear from each of our parents about having gone through that 8-hour workshop. What was your biggest aha for yourself about what was keeping you stuck in a place of fear, maybe what was keeping you doing things for your family member that you could step back and do? If any of you are ready to jump in and answer that, just go for it.
So I think, first of all, I want to say that I think the Succeed program is, you know, what makes it successful is what I tell everybody is UMSL trains the students and Joyzen and Succeed train the parents. And without that training, you know, it just isn't going to work. I actually think it should be on every college campus, forget if your kid has special needs or not. But anyway, that being said, so I think for me, the biggest thing that kept me where I am or where I was is definitely the fear component. I mean, I think, as I've learned from Liz, everything comes down to fear and dealing with that and letting go and letting your child fail and get better and, you know, learn from their failures.
So is there something about that, like and concrete activity that you
Sure.
did?
Well, I think it was more post the workshop than it was during the workshop, taking, you know, like all the role playing I was able to use. For example, Ellie called me one time from Succeed and was like, you know, my sheet doesn't fit. I mean, and she was going nuts and she was yelling at me and it was all my fault and the sheet was coming up and what am I going to do? And aren't you going to do something? You know, and she was just angry and mad. And I was able to say to her, okay, Ellie, instead of saying, okay, I'll come right down there and I'll fix it for you, or let me get you a sheet right this second. I said, okay, Ellie, you know, what do you think you can do about this? I don't know. Well, is there somebody you could ask to help you? I don't know. And it went from there, but I could go on and on to give her the tool set to ask her the right questions, to walk her through it so that she could figure it out. And I know you were talking about life-saving medication. So before Ellie went to Succeed, I was calling and making doctor's appointments. I was filling prescriptions when they were empty. And I was able to wash my hands of it. And, you know, she called me a couple times. I don't have any more pills left. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Just screaming at me because she had never been known how to do it for herself. So eventually I was like, well, Ellie, who could you call? The doctor? Well, it's 9 o'clock at night. Well, who else could you call? I don't know. Well, Ellie, let's think about it. Where do you pick up pills? I don't know. Well, where do we go when we need to get medication? Oh, CVS. Okay, well, who could you talk to at the CVS? I don't know. Well, who do I talk to when I go there? And eventually she got to pharmacist, and eventually we got to, she looked up the number. She did it all on her own. But again, it was pulling back and being able to not run over and say, you know, here's your pills, or, you know, she calls the doctor for the refill now. She calls the pharmacy if they haven't texted her that it's ready. So that part, you know, that's just one example where I can say, having gone through Joyzen and all that training has not only helped her, but has helped me and let her really flower independently.
Awesome. I love the fact that you brought up the role plays, because I think families really don't like doing role plays, but they're so helpful to just see how a conversation plays out, and the fact that you can take a breath and then think about how to coach instead of solve the problem that's a game changer. So that's a great example. Rachel mentioned medications. We had a question about what to do when a family member wants to take more responsibility for their medication, but the medications are really life-saving medications, and we've dealt with that situation multiple times, and it's about lowering the safety net. So not necessarily taking it away where we don't provide any support around the medications, but we go through those coaching conversations to figure out what does need to be in place to ensure that the medications are taken. I remember there was a young lady who went to Succeed about 4 years ago, and she had the same situation. And I had suggested to her and her mom that they use a technology, they use a prescription service that would beep until you took your medication. And they listened to what I had to say, but the two of them actually strategized together. And what they did was her daughter actually sent her a quick post every morning saying, I took the medication. And that worked for the two of them. And it was a problem solved, and it was great. I know, Scott, you're working with your daughter now on medications. What are some of the strategies you guys are using?
So, yeah, for whatever reason, Katie stopped taking 3 of her pills all at one time. Just stop. No reason why. Just stop. And it affected her work. It affected her home life. Her boss even called me to say, hey, I'm having some issues with Katie, and you need to help, or I'm going to have to fire her, basically. So we got one of those little weekly pill containers, for every day of the week. And so we started out with sitting down with her on a Monday evening at dinner, and her just putting all of her pills in the right spots, and we count afterwards and make sure that they all line up, and that worked great for us. We did that with her for about 3 weeks, and then we kind of backed away and just kind of like, okay, now did you do this? And yes, Mom. So yeah, it was a big problem, but she knows how it affects her, and she knows that she needs to take the medicine. So it's just a matter of letting them live the consequence.
Yeah, well, and you gave her a tool that helped her to get past it too, which I think is often the difference between doing for and washing your hands of a situation, is developing that tool with the person. Brandy, I want you to be able to jump in and share your joys and aha after you went through the workshop. What was kind of something that you took away that you used in your family?
I remember sitting in the Joyzen workshop and sitting there thinking, of course, this is about me. Why is it back to being about me and my issues versus kids' issues? Because I was like, I've done enough, learning about myself and exploration. But I remember them coming back and asking, I think it was Liz saying, well, what are you fearful of? And I was like, I don't want to talk about my fears. I have done this before, but it was an aha moment that, again, that a lot of the limitations that I place not only on Jake, but on the girls too, that it's based on things that I'm worried about. And it's a lot of it. It also reminded me that if I get something like where I'm really nervous about it, well, that's probably because something in my past has happened that I'm focused on. I remember those feelings of being left out. I remember, not being picked up or knowing how to get home. I remember those feelings. And, being a parent, I think we go into it thinking, I'm going to do such a great job. I'm going to be the best, and then we get in the way of them, again, as I said, growing into their own adults versus adult children. You want young adults that are being raised. And so, yeah, that's what my main thing was for Joyce. And I was just like, really, yeah, it's back to me. But it's the truth. And talking about like the medicine too, I felt that I went through Joyzen at a time that we had a leeway of time where I knew when Jacob, we would want him to apply to Succeed. And so we just started kind of making a list and identifying what we're fearful of and what we could do something about. And I'm a former teacher, so I like to scaffold. I'm a science teacher. I like to scaffold back, teach, train, and then release. But it's harder when it's your own child. I'm a better advocate for anybody else's kid with getting them to move forward than I am my own, because again, it's that mom fear that comes into play. But we just kind of made a list of things that Jake would need to be able to do, and then prioritized and just started scaffolding it. And even one of the things is I wanted to be before COVID. I wanted to be able to work out in the morning before the kids got up, but I needed to know that Jake got up in time to go to vocational skills program. Well, so now every time he gets up, even to this day, I get a text on my phone, I'm up, so that way It allows me to be with myself and to be calm and enjoy my life, and gives him the responsibility of following through.
That's wonderful. And I will never forget your first big jump after Joyzen. You sent Jake off on a plane across the country, as I recall.
Well, to Arkansas, but it could have been way across the country for me. But again, it was one of those that I was just like, okay, for me to feel like he is capable of doing this, what could I help with? And so he's really good with social stories. He does well with that. So we wrote a social story together. He read it. You know, and then I walked him through, he counted the gates, you know, so like for the next time you know, we can push him even just a little bit further each time. And, you know, he was boarding on some nice lady. So I just assumed he was chatting up someone the whole time, all the way to Little Rock, because he was going to go see Mimi, which he was very excited about. But yeah, that was a big step.
Yeah. Well, and what a great sense of accomplishment for all of your kids. I think there is a change that happens, and I don't know if one of you would like to talk about that, but the change your child experiences when you change your approach and you start to give them clues and indications that they can handle things that maybe they weren't sure they could before. Did you all see changes with that? Brandy, you're up front, so I'm just going to let you continue, and then we'll move to Rachel and Scott if they want to jump in.
I would say yes. And I would say that, you know, with Jacob being my oldest and having an intellectual disability, I learned a lot that works with him, but then it just trickles down to my daughters, where I feel fortunate with that, quite honestly. And, you know, with Jake, just giving him those positive affirmations that, you know, you can do this, you know, and I get the two, like, well, what would what would I do? Who should you call? And I get the, but then he figures it out, you know, he figures it out, and he doesn't growl so much at other people when they have them, you know, try to get him to figure it out. But just, you know, the can do attitude. And then the fact that when he texts me and says I'm up, and I'm just like, hey, that's awesome, have a great day. You know, he's so much happier with himself versus having me around nagging him, do this, do this, do this. So it's, you know, our relationship and the atmosphere in our house and the things that he feels like he's capable of. You know, I see him learning little things that he can do, and then he takes it a step forward.
That is just such a cool thing to hear.
Yeah. I just want to piggyback just for one quick second with Brandy, what she's talking about, him getting himself up is such a huge skill for him when he gets out into the workforce, that he's going to be able to get himself out of bed, get himself to his job. And these are not things that we're thinking about as parents. And it's such a simple thing. It's, you know, it's just easy for us to get them up out of bed. You don't want to do that. You want to hand that over to them. So it's a huge skill in that process of independence.
Yep. Well, and I think almost every person on this call has probably gone through that. When she said it's easy to wake them up, I was thinking about your daughter, Scott, and she's she was not easy to get out of bed. But I do want to flip back to you, because I want to talk about this idea of your relationship changing. And I know that you had that experience with Katie. How do you think it impacted Katie when you started approaching things differently with her?
It really helped once she realized what was going on and that things weren't going to be the same. She's taken that a little too far a few times, and we've had to bring her back in. But yeah, and she grew. I think right now we're at a point where she's not going to grow anymore being at home. And she's just not picking up those skills, because she knows that mom or me will take care of it.
Yeah.
So, you know, leaving dirty dishes all over the place.
Well, and I feel like that's something that the two of you had to work through quite a bit, like that whole power struggle thing and figuring out, you thought it was a power struggle, but I feel like you were assessing why she was doing things through a different lens after going through Joyzen, and realized that she wanted something else from you.
Yeah, she was, I had a hard time figuring out why she was acting out and why, the regular tools weren't working. And I had to step back, and thanks to Liz, I learned about the 5 love languages and figured out her love language is different, and she wants quality time. And I sat back and I thought about it. I'm like, that's what she wants. She wants quality time. Not that much of it. It's only like 5 minutes or so, but when she wants quality time with me, she really needs quality time. And that was a big step for us.
And what a different way for you and her to approach it. You could have quality time doing those dishes together and getting that together versus arguing about it.
Yeah, I'm the dishwasher here, so.
Sometimes you just have to accept that role, Scott.
Yeah.
Rachel, how about you? What is your daughter's reaction to the Joyzen process?
Yeah, so Ellie is very responsible. She always has been one to pop out of bed, get her stuff together, take care of herself. But the thing that I have struggled with her is more on the social side of things. I have really struggled with her socially because she's a very, very immature 20-year-old. And so and I'm still working on it, but I have had what I've learned from Liz and from Joyzen is, as Liz always says, to take care of myself, because if I'm good, she'll be good. It's the whole thing on the airplane where you put your mask on yourself before your kid, you got to take care of yourself first before you can help them. And I will, openly admit that I still struggle with it because Ellie doesn't pick up on social cues, nonverbals, all the rest of it, seems to just talk over people, interrupt. And, even something as simple as a family dinner becomes very difficult for me and challenging because she's not acting as the way I want her to act. And I have really struggled with that. But I have found when I remove myself from the situation, be it walk away, turn my back, go upstairs for a minute, and then come back, she gets better. I even at one point when COVID first hit and everyone was coming home from the dorms very quickly, she was just a mess. And I'm sure it was a combination of that, being at home, her older sister was at home, everybody was there, and the acting out was just ridiculous. And anyway, so I actually sat down and I said, listen, if you act like this at the kitchen table and raise your voice and interrupt people, I am going to walk upstairs and I am going to leave. And I even told her what was going to happen and what I was going to do, because I didn't want to get in an interchange of constantly telling her, let somebody else talk. No, it's not your turn. You're interrupting, da, 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 da. And so when I did, I actually laid it out. I never had to do that, but there are still times I find when she is at home where it gets too much for me. I just have to get up and like go do dishes or go start doing something else. So for me, it hasn't really been sort of the nuts and bolts of daily life, because Ellie is very capable and very good at that. And she's very responsible, but it's more the social aspect that I have struggled with. And I know that she struggles with too. And I've sort of have to give that up. And, if she's going to act like she does, it's not my responsibility, as Liz has taught me, to make her happy, find her friends. We've put many opportunities in front of her throughout her young life to take advantage. And I've got to step back because it's got to be on her, and it's either going to happen or it's not. But I can't be, as we say, keep making play dates when you're, 20 years old. So.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that's more subtle, I think, as far as consequences, where that is a very significant consequence to be sitting by yourself on a Saturday night because you haven't learned how to do the nuances of social communication. But at what point, as a parent, do you step back and say, okay, she's going to figure this out, and I'm going to hold on and be there and be your mom as it goes along. So I like that example a lot. Liz, I'm going to ask you to do something really hard and talk about kind of what happens when a parent is in that emotional feeling that Rachel's talking about, where something that is going on with their family member is really brings out a lot of emotions in them, and what happens with the brain and how it cycles and maybe causes everybody to go to a negative place.
Well, there's lots of pieces to this. First of all, I wanted to say this a little bit earlier, that the majority of the parents who have children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, not all, but the majority of us have PTSD. We've gone through some pretty significant events when these children were younger. And because of those events, we are post-traumatic stress disorder. So what happens is, like when Rachel was talking about if her daughter's escalating, we get triggered. And a lot of different things start to happen. And the trigger can come back. It may be triggering her from something that happened in her past or something that happened along the way while she was working with her daughter. But these fears or anxiety starts to come in. So if, let's say, when you were a kid, you were made fun of, or you were not in a social group, or you found it really hard to connect with people. If your child presents that to you, you're going to get triggered. All those old feelings and emotions are going to come in, and you're going to not want to feel that way. You're getting in pain. So what happens is that you're going to want to step in and stop what's happening with the young adult. You're going to fix it. You're going to make play dates. You're going to do whatever you need to do so that you don't feel what you're feeling. And there's a lot of pieces that go on with that. You have, if you are triggered, you can have, your brain shoots off adrenaline and cortisol. What happens is your brain wave activity. There's 5 different states of electricity in our brain. We have a delta, gamma, theta, beta, and I forgot the other one at the moment. But anyway, the ones that I work with is the gamma. When we are in a gamma state, our brain is producing around 40 kilowatts per second of electricity through our brain. This is when we're engaged in life and we're happy, we're in a learning state. When we get into an anxiety state, our brain electricity reduces down to a beta wave, and you're only working with 13 to 17 kilowatts of electricity in your brain per second. So that's why when you're upset and angry or sad, you feel drained. You literally are drained. Your brain is draining the electricity that's coming through your body. And what happens too is that we are connected. So our Daniel Goleman, they did some studies at Harvard that showed that our brain activity affects other people's brain activities around us. So if someone goes into a beta state and you're in a gamma state and you start to reduce down to their state, you start to get upset and angry or whatever, what happens is you're kind of like locking and loading. So when you're upset with your child and they're creating this triggered event, what happens is that you're not going to be able to get yourself out of it. You have to be aware of what's happening to you, and you want to disengage and you want to do something to take care of yourself, get yourself back up in a gamma state. Because what happens if you can maintain being calm, cool, collected, you will actually affect their brainwave activity and bring it up to that gamma state. So that's kind of the physiology. It's a very simple explanation. It's much more complicated than the way I'm presenting it. But when you understand it and you are able to look at yourself and go, oh my goodness, I'm getting triggered right now. I'm not going to be effective in working with this young adult. I'm not going to do what I need to do to help them so that they can gain the skills that they need. Then you're going to want to step back, take care of yourself, and then re-enter in using the skills that we teach in the workshop. And also acknowledging the feelings that are going on. It isn't that you're going to fix what's going on. You're not going to fix the feelings, but the awareness of it in and of itself is going to help you when you're navigating working with your young adult. And it is a very important piece that if anybody's watching this and you do have a child with intellectual developmental disabilities, you may want to look at what your journey has been, which is something we do in our workshop. We look at your journey, but not only the stories that have happened, but also the emotional pieces that have come and that you're still carrying to this day. So
I
Andrew,
really like how so many of the pieces of the Joyzen Parent Powerhouse workshop are really coming out here, because I think when you talk about letting go and quitting being a caregiver, it all sounds very amorphous. And what really happens is that you're going in and you're doing specific skill building around self-awareness, around self-care, around positive behavior interventions, and really also building those skills of coaching, which I think are so incredibly important. And I want to draw Andrew in. Andrew is a parent of a younger kiddo. How do these Joyzen techniques play out when you're talking about a child that's still in elementary or middle school?
Really, really well. And I don't, I know that it's not just because as a facilitator, I've been through Joyzen like 5,000 times, but, I think one of the most incredible things that I've been able to experience with a young child with multiple disabilities is through, back to what Rachel was saying about those fears and worries, and Liz talking about trauma, every traumatic experience my son has gone through at school, I've been through that as well with him. So through those fears and worries of those traumas, I really have been able to immediately identify when I am keeping something from my son, or stepping in the way, keeping him from experiencing something because I'm afraid and worried. And through that, other kids have been able to teach him and mentor him, and he listens much better to them than he does me. But also his confidence has changed incredibly just over the past 2 years. And it's because he's experiencing more. Because I recognize that my fears and worries were keeping him from being able to trust himself, and learn to lean on himself and help himself. So
I bet that's impacted his relationships with all those kids too, and all those other people.
yeah, so 2 years ago, even my kiddo didn't have friends, and now he's literally downstairs. Spring break started today. Great. He's downstairs on the phone with like 3 friends from our neighborhood playing video games together, and that didn't happen. Couldn't have happened if I never let him go ride his bike down the street, because I was too worried. So that's
Congratulations.
been impactful. The strategy, the skill, I love you, 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 that we talk about in Joyzen is still, the first workshop I picked it up and I haven't stopped using it, but I am.
Could you explain what the heck that means?
I can explain. Yes, I am not just.
I say it a lot when you and I work together, so it's a good thing.
I know. Yeah, so I'm really impatient, especially when it comes to my kiddo. And I know that that's where he gets it from. But in times of crisis, or when, we're not in the right gamma space, I can look at my son and in my head just say, I love you, I love you, I love you, over and over again. And it immediately brings me to a place where I can be patient and present and listen. So it kind of just helps me get into a better headspace. Liz can explain it a lot better, but that's how I use it.
well, you're interrupting your beta and you're getting back into your gamma by when you sit there and you say the mantra over and over again. So, and it works. If anybody out there, just try it. So if you're angry at somebody and they're in a very agitated state, if you can just say, you don't say it out loud, you just say it in your head over and over again, you will change. You'll be pulling yourself up to what I was saying, that gamma. You'll watch how they change too. One of two things will happen. They'll either change or they'll go away, and then they'll come back. So it works.
I have suggested that. That is a tool you can use with any human. I had somebody come to me and tell me that her mother-in-law was making her crazy, and we tried the I love you, and it worked like a charm. And I know that during this pandemic, you are stuck with somebody in your space that you might just need to bring your gamma rays up. So thank you, Andrew, for bringing up that specific example. We had a question, how old your child should be to go through Joyzen. And I hope Andrew just answered part of that by saying that all of these concepts work for people of any age. And it's really about understanding some of the tools that you might need to be an effective parent and how to take care of yourself, because there are a lot of situations that are specific to raising a child with a disability that cause these skills to be important to nurture and to build. I'm going to go to everybody, including you, Liz, and ask you to talk about what was your biggest, maybe biggest challenge or biggest success with your family member, so that you could move forward using some of the Joyzen strategies where you really felt like you had to pull those tools out and put them to use. Before I go, I will say that this is a workshop for parents. At some point, we might get to the capacity where we could do some Joyzen work directly with young adults, but we do other workshops with them. The Joyzen strategies are specifically for the parent without the child present, so that we can give you what you need and the tools you need. So and who would like to go first in talking about their biggest Joyzen success or their biggest goal that they've approached using some of their strategies?
One of the things, like when Jake, again, he was in high school, just starting off when I went to Joyzen, and I wanted him to start walking home, or at least I was substitute teaching in the elementary school that was nearby. But the path that he would take going from the high school to come meet me at school, at the elementary school, or to walk home, he would have to go through this little alley where all the smokers would hang out. And my first initial thought was, well, I've got to get those smokers to go away. They can't be there for when he comes through, because they're going to offer him cigarettes or who knows what they're going to give him. And then I was just like, okay, wait a second. And I just was like, I need to sit with this and think it through. So my fear was that I was going to go in and change it. Whereas, like, even we all know, I mean, they're going to come back. I would, if that's my hangout place. And so instead, what we did, I encouraged Jacob just to chat with everyone and make friends with them as he was coming through. And then Jacob, luckily, if you open a door for him, he walks through it. And he is so social that everybody was then getting to know him. And I always think about, like, okay, and planning with the end in mind, I want him to be able to comfortably be able to walk anywhere. I can't change the atmosphere, but I can allow him to learn how to get to know people, so then they're friends with him and we look out for our friends. So that was just kind of one of the ideas that came to mind for me.
Yeah, I love that. You're building some skills for him, because he's going to be in a situation in the future where he's going to be walking somewhere where you haven't vetted who's there.
Right.
So, cool. That's good to know. Who would like to go next?
So I think the biggest win was in that first Joyzen workshop, where one of the exercises we do is you each write down where you want your kid to be in 5 years, 10 years, what do you think they're going to be down the road? And Donna and I wrote down totally opposite things. So I think the best part of Joyzen is where the parents can hold each other accountable and call them out. Because a lot of times, and once in a while, Donald say to me as well, hey, let consequences need to be consequences. Let hands off. And it's like, nope, you're right. It's like, but here's my concern. And then we talk about it. So that really helps us to stay focused on the important message for Katie and come up with that together.
I love that. And I do think that these are the kinds of conversations that we don't make time for all the time. that having this critical conversation about where do you see things going? What do you want? Do you see Katie in the same place that I do? Those are really critical to success. And I think that this gave you guys a space to do that. And I remember when Donna talked a little bit about some of her preconceptions about what she thought you would want your role to be as a parent, and how important it was for those conversations to be held. So great example, Scott. Thank you.
It's funny when Brandy said the walking home, I've had a similar situation with my youngest, Molly, and walking home from the bus. But I mean, even before that, I think the biggest thing that Joyzen has taught me is to sort of stop, identify that emotion, let that emotion come up, go through it, experience it. And I have spent my life pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. And of course, during the workshop, it all exploded, and it still simmers below, just not as badly right now. But so I was very confident that Molly could walk home from the top of our street to the house by herself. You know, she's rarely by herself without somebody like hovering or doing for her, telling her what to do. And I just knew she could do it. She had to do it. It was ridiculous. So I think by, stepping back and knowing that she could do it gave her the confidence. And I was allowed to convince the school district, which was a whole nother story, from the public school, because I didn't want her taking the SSD bus to my curb anymore. I needed to have her walk home, my God. So we gradually, Liz and I were able to work together, where at first I was there when she got off the bus. Then a week later, I'd move down 2 doors, then 2 more doors, and she'd walk to that, and then she'd walk home. And then eventually I'd be at the top of the driveway, then she'd come through the door. And I mean, so even now, she can walk home, and she can walk into an empty house and be alone by herself for an hour or whatever. And I, have sort of stopped, like, oh, I got to get home from the grocery store. I'm not going to do this because she's coming home. She has to be able to walk into the house by herself and do that. And so I think because of going through that, I was able to sort of stop and, like, what's going on here? Identify the fear, all the fears of what could happen from the top of the street to the house, which were so blown out of proportion. And of course, now, she walks home and walks into a house, and it's good for her to be independent, and it's good for me to be able to go and live my life and not be, tethered to that 3 o'clock time when she's going to come home. And it's even more important during COVID, since it's a short day and she's home, she's out of school at 1 o'clock. So I can't just, be limiting myself, from school, from, the time school starts until 1. That's ridiculous. So, but again, it's letting go of all that fear and what could happen. And oh my God, it goes on and on. So that's been a huge thing.
Lee, and you said something we haven't really talked about, which is naming the emotion you're feeling, which is probably the number one thing Liz has taught me, is that emotions are driving a lot of your actions. And if we pretend that part doesn't matter, as a professional, I've spent a lot of time giving people solutions, but if I'm not helping them acknowledge, I'm really scared about this, or I feel shame because of something, or whatever it might be, then we're not really going to resolve the problem. And that's been a big aha for me. So it's nice to hear you kind of talk about working through some of those things. Liz, how about you?
I have so many stories. I don't even know where to start.
You guys, most of them you have to go to the class to get to hear all of Liz's stories, but she'll tell you one.
But one of my favorite ones, if you can call it a favorite, he's still, even to today, I am still learning. And I want you to know that this is a process. You don't ever get necessarily to the finish line, but you definitely get to learn how to expand and grow yourself. Tyler wanted to learn to drive. He was in my ear from the time he was 16 till the time he was almost 18. And Tyler has cerebral palsy. He's technically blind in his right eye. There's just a multitude of things that are going on with him. And I was like, no, I remember just digging in. And my husband, who was doing more the Joyzen in that moment than I was. It's like, what's the problem? Like, you're supposed to be backing me up. This is not okay. So then his brother and sister got him in the car, and without my knowledge, and they videotaped him driving a car in our neighborhood, missing all the mailboxes. And they're like, see, he can drive. I'm like, he doesn't even have a permit. What are you guys doing? So I was determined, because of my fear that if he got in an accident, he would die. And finally, my husband turned to me and goes, what are you afraid of? I go, he's going to die. He could get in a car accident, he could die. And he goes, and so could you. And so can I. And so could Danielle. And so could Chris. You're not giving him a chance. So I took him to a doctor, the eye doctor, because I thought for sure they'd say, oh no, he can't do it. And nope, he can do it. So then I took him to a driving school, which evaluated, or it's really a medical place, but they were evaluating his reflexes because of his cerebral palsy. And I thought for sure they were going to tell me no, and they didn't. They said, no, he can do it. And I'm like, y'all suck. So I hate all of you. So needless to say, I caved, and he took the test because I thought, okay, and that boy studied that test because he wanted it so bad. And he failed the first time, but the second time he did it. Then I said, I can't drive you. I got him a driving instructor. There was just no way. My anxiety was just out through the roof. So the driving instructor said he did great. So he goes and takes his test. Now, this is the beautiful part. My daughter failed in the first round of the driving test when I took her. Christopher, I think he got like an 88, and my daughter got like an 85. Tyler got a 94. A 94. He did better in the driving than my other two children, and he still drives today. Yes, he's had a couple of car accidents, mild ones. So has my daughter. So has my son. So we actually do drive well in this family, but it's just moving through that process. And
once you got the license, you still scaffolded it, because I remember when I met Tyler, you guys were using the ever popular Find a Friend app, so that if something happened and he got lost, you could zoom in and see where he was and help him get to the place where he knew he needed to be to be able to handle it.
And he couldn't drive the highways in the beginning. Everything's in moderation. If you notice how all the parents, when they're talking, is that there's these steps. A lot of times when we're making a change to a behavior, it's not going to be immediate. It's going to be a gradual step.
Question is, and Liz, this might be for you, what to tell parents that have gone through Joyzen that are pushing through to that 100%, but they're getting pushback from siblings that are afraid that they're pushing too hard and that they're maybe putting their sibling with a disability in a bad position.
That makes total sense. All their fear is coming up. So you have to address what is their fear when they're coming, because you're going to get that. That's going to be happening. Family members, siblings, friends, they may look at you and say, what are you doing? Why are you not protecting them? And the opposite, and the answer to that is that it's not that you're protecting them. There's always that phrase, that which you protect, you weaken. I'm actually loving my child in a greater way than by being someone who would, make sure they have a bubble around them. So you're going to want to ask them real quickly. You're going to want to ask them what it is that they're fearful of, and then take that, whatever they're fearful of, and ask them, and how does that fit for you? Where in your life do you feel that has happened to you? If you can get to their fear, you're going to get them to kind of back off. Andrew, would you like to comment on that?
No, you took my answer. Yeah.
My comment is, gosh, let's do a sibling Joyzen. I think that could be super cool.
Yeah, well, and so we've had at UMSL, when we have Joyzen for Succeed families, we've had, siblings come, because sometimes those are, caretakers of.
And we have two, actually.
Yeah. And it is really beneficial, because again, siblings have traumas that we as parents aren't having. We don't know what, it feels like to be them. So that sibling support is really, really important.
You are right. I ask you to put on your college advisor hat. Why should a family consider the Parent Powerhouse Joyzen workshop? What does it do for students and the parents that go through that come through Succeed?
Something that I really love to see and is parents having adult relationships with their children, and also seeing parents take care of themselves. You know, students that graduate Succeed are totally different, you know, after 2 years. But what's really awesome is so are parents. So much more relaxed. But they're, you know, parents grow a lot too through that experience. So
Thank you, Andrew. That was beautiful. Brandy.
I would encourage for parents and family members to attend Joyzen, just because you're kind of planning with the end in mind. You know, when I say the end in mind, I'm thinking about Jake. You know, I want him to have those same opportunities as his sisters. He can live in the community on his own if he wants, and to learn that we always say we want independence, but I don't think any of us are really independent. I always push for interdependent, that you know who to go to that's reliable and you can ask for help. So I think Joyzen kind of helps you have that aha moment where you're able to work through your fears to get them to that next step. And I would say, I think Scott mentioned this when he was talking about he and his wife had different goals, the 5-year goal. What I've been fortunate with is I have a group of friends that we're all very like-minded as parents, and we kind of have the same vision for our young adults. And so most of us have gone through Joyzen, and so we can do like a quick Joyzen check. You know, I'm thinking this way, set me straight, or actually agree with me, but tell me seriously if it's Joyzen or not. And we do have a cheer where one of us will say joy and then another one will say Zen. So it's just nice to have those people in your corner. So yeah, so joy, Zen.
Yeah. All right. I love that. I'm really glad you said that, because I was going to leave without saying part of our Joyzen strategy at the ARC is offering tune-ups. So after you go through that 8-hour workshop, we regularly have check-ins where we come together for 90 minutes and talk about how's it been going. And Liz kind of works through some additional strategies. So just know that that's also available to you, whether you've done our Joyzen session or the one at Succeed. Thank you, Brandy. Rachel, next on the screen.
I would just say, I mean, like I think I started this with, it's just life-changing from, affirming everything you thought, about yourself and about your child and about where they're going, and where they're going to end up or how you want them to end up. I think Joyzen, it just has sort of held my hand and taken me through those steps to get Ellie, to where she needs to be post Succeed and what we want for her to live independently. I think it's still a journey, even though I'm tired and I'm done. I have another one coming down the pipe and God only knows what's going to happen there. But, it's just given us the tools to move forward and, have success at the end, hopefully.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, every tool, that's for me is so important, because we spend so much time talking to young adults about how to become their best self and become independent. And we spend very little time as professionals giving parents the tools to make that happen. So thank you, Rachel, for sharing that. Scott, you're next up.
I think Joyzen is really useful because after your kid graduates and they turn 18 or whatever it is, so all the support that they've had and all these, tools and people involved that they've had up to this point just stops. So like they turn 18, they're out of high school, and it's like, okay, now what? I don't have to get up. I don't do any parents the tools to work through that and to try and help them figure out a direction for their kid. I mean, I know it really helped us a lot.
What would you like to ask?
My daughter Abby has an older sibling who is hesitant on some of our choices. She's always ultra conservative, like, why would you let her do that? Or that sounds dangerous and things like that. So, but I think Liz addressed it. I took a couple notes there, and she needs some Joyzen.
Just a little quick, you might want to ask her how she has felt responsible for her sibling, and how can you help support her not to feel so responsible for her sibling and the outcome of her sibling.
Yeah, that's really, really a good point, because I think she's the oldest, Abby's the youngest. She's very responsible. I mean, and she's like co-trustee for her in the event that we would happen. She's like all on this. Where do you have everything? What's the code for the safe? I mean, she's just so I think she feels a lot of weight. But I keep telling her we're doing this so you don't have weight. I mean, that the whole idea of it is, if Dad and I knock off tomorrow, we've raised a can-do young woman. And she always makes these comments, you'll never have to worry about Abby. Don't worry about Abby. It's like, well, I don't want you to worry about Abby. I mean, that's the whole idea is so that's really good. That's a good, I might send her that link. Maybe she needs she did a sib shop when she was younger.
Yeah, well, you know what? Adult sibs still need that. And Angie, we'll get a tune up on the books and bring your daughter. It'd be fun to have her there. Liz, do you have a final comment you'd like to make?
No, I just want to thank everyone for listening to us. And I can tell you that by far, if you to come to one of our workshops, you will find a piece, a nugget every single parent does. And you will be able to go from caretaker to advisor. And that is the goal. Thank you.
All right. Well, there you have it, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate your time, and go out and do some joy.
Zen!
Wait,
Bye,
Zen! I was on mute.
Wow. That's awesome.